I'm Silas. Welcome to my podcast, Deliberate, Living Your 20s with Intention. I hope you enjoy today's episode. All right, we are live. This is Caleb and Silas today. We're chatting about Praxis and just kind of connecting. Just want to give you kind of quick background. I'm not sure if you've seen any of these podcasts, but typically what I like to do is, and the reason I started this was I had wanted to start a podcast for a long time. And I was just like always afraid of doing it. I'm like, I need equipment, I need this. It's like, nah, you don't really, you just need to have a conversation and record it. So like, that's all it is us getting to know each other. For anybody listening for the first time, this is us getting to know each other for the first time and just kind of talking about one specific kind of area of topics and putting it out for the world to see. So I guess with that, you want to introduce yourself and kind of give me a little bit of a rundown?
Yeah, sure. So obviously I'm Caleb. Before Praxis, I was a student at UW-Madison in Wisconsin, which I thought was my dream school, but didn't really pan out that way. I kind of believed, like I think a lot of other people, that college was the ticket for me. I went through a lot of different stages. I started out as an architecture major at a community college, transferred to University of Wisconsin Green Bay in hopes of getting into Madison, and decided to pursue business. And somehow I made it into UW-Madison. And if you don't know, you might because you're from Wisconsin, but they're supposed to have a pretty good business school, pretty well respected. And I was expecting like all this collaboration and bouncing ideas off of other students, and it really didn't end up that way. I was taking classes that had nothing to do with anything. Actually, a funny story. My first semester there, I caught my ethics teacher plagiarizing a paper. I had a lot of really bizarre experiences, but the second semester at UW, I was preparing to go into my senior year, and my dad called me up, and he knew I was feeling frustrated with college and stuff, and he said, so what skills have you developed? What have you learned so far through college? And I thought for a minute, and I couldn't give him any good answer because truthfully, pretty much any practical knowledge I'd learned in college could have been squeezed into one semester. Mm-hmm. That being learning how to write papers and emails, the basic stuff. And I couldn't justify going back to school in the fall for more Zoom university.
Yeah.
Being taught by professors that, one, didn't care about my own professional development, and two, had no clue how to use the internet or Zoom or anything like that. So I had made some friends outside of school, thankfully, in Madison, and one of them works at a startup there, and he almost went to Praxis. I don't know what that story is, but he recommended it, and I did a whole pile of research over the summer, read everything I possibly could, watched podcasts, and eventually I just decided I needed to go for it. And that was like a week and a half ago. Things moved pretty quickly. I had 2 interviews, and now I'm starting in 6-7 days. So
that is
really excited.
Very cool, man. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So I mean, I've never actually. I'm trying to see like if on this podcast I've spoken to people who went through college all like completely, and then they like decided that they wanted Praxis on top of it. But like I've never heard anybody who had that kind of experience with it just be like, yeah, like absolutely not. And it's interesting, obviously, because we haven't had a COVID in the past, right? So
right.
The whole idea with doing online classes but paying UW-Madison tuition costs is not ideal, right?
Right.
Okay, well that's interesting. So I guess what kind of was the, what was the driving factor with your ultimate, like, what was the main point of Praxis that made you say, yes, I want to do this? Like, I think it's going to be good for
It was, I think initially it was the comparison of being able to start my career at a startup, at a small company that is high growth and really excited about the future, kind of compared to the bleak alternative of going into a massive corporation with hundreds of other students that look exactly like me on paper. Because I remember last year I went to a career fair. It was mandatory, and there were like, I don't know, 40 or 50,000 people there, all trying to hand out their resumes and convince employers that they were the right candidate for the job and that they were different than all the other thousands of people out there just with a single resume. And the person, the employer would take the resume and just stick it in a pile and say, okay, go apply online. So I think that was a big factor. The other part being that I could kind of create my own career. I didn't have to follow a certain major and learn a specific set of skills. If I wanted to learn like how to start a podcast, for example, I could learn how to do that and then make that a valuable part of my education. So that kind of customization tied with, I think, better opportunities was the main factor for Praxis for me.
That makes sense. I think that you're definitely in the right place then, especially like if you don't know exactly like specifically what you want to do, then it's a good place. I think what I've gathered, like I had a friend of mine recently apply to Praxis, get accepted, and then ultimately decide to go a different way. But she told me that she's like, thank you for like kind of pushing me to apply, because that application process alone and like going through all this really helped me figure out what I want. And it's like, that's what kind of I can't say that when I applied to Praxis, I figured out what I wanted. But at the same time, like just the application process alone to me was so valuable. I was like, if I'm literally applying and enjoying the application process this much and like how much it asks me tough questions, I don't know how it is now. They might have changed it, but I'm like, absolutely, like I got to do this, right?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely gets you thinking.
For me, the hard part was when I applied last year in March, and I got accepted, and then I wasn't really certain on if I wanted to move forward, because at the time I was in insurance sales. I was like making pretty good money, and I was like, I don't really know if I'm willing to go backwards, because the 50 grand a year, guaranteed salary would have been backwards for me, and I was like, I don't know, right? So I ended up holding off on it. I was like, maybe I'll just do the education portion, right? And then I ended up leaving my insurance job and then joined Praxis, and it was definitely the greatest thing ever. I ended up in New York because of it, right? Because of the community, right? It wasn't because of the Praxis partners specifically, but because of the community, right? You just meet so many awesome people who can just connect you. I guess one thing would be, it's a lot of times like what I like to ask people is what they've seen differently after they've gone through Praxis, but obviously you haven't gone through it yet. Are there any questions you have about the program? I know it's slightly different than when I went through it now, but like, is there any questions that I might be able to answer for you?
I don't think any big questions. I'm sure once I start getting my feet wet a little more than just taking a headshot and setting up my LinkedIn profile, I'll have some more ideas, but
Yeah.
none come to mind at the moment. I've been asking questions to people every day, so I think I've got everything answered pretty well.
Questions are the best way to learn. Like for me, and this is part of the reason I do the podcast, I do podcasting in general, is because I learn best when I'm talking out loud to somebody, right? I'll literally be telling somebody what I think, but it's actually coming together as I say it, right?
Yeah, I know that exact feeling.
So it's like, you gotta have conversations. You gotta just talk. You gotta go and let your thoughts come out. I think that's why writing is good for a lot of people. What is, I guess, do you kind of have a certain direction, like with startups that you want to go? Like, is there a certain sector that's interesting to you? Is there a certain role that you initially right now kind of see yourself going towards? What do you ultimately want to be when you grow up, kind of thing?
That's a loaded question. Um, for me personally, I have always been really, really creative. Not with anything in particular. I'm not that great at any one thing, but I love music production, love graphic design, love photography. Pretty much any creative outlet I'm drawn towards. Um, and alongside that, I have a love of business. I love entrepreneurship. That's why I'm here. Um, so, kind of trying to tie those things together, I think, could point me towards a lot of jobs. But one thing in particular that I'm kind of using to, um, I guess, I'm using as a guideline for something to work towards. I saw this job on Slack in the job opportunities channel, and it said junior designer. And that really stuck out to me, working with companies, helping them create a vision for a product or a logo even. And that kind of thing is really interesting to me. Um, it's a little different than marketing. It's not quite operations and it's not quite sales, but that's definitely something I could see myself doing in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's good to notice that. Like, it's good to recognize that stuck out to you, because then you can use that as kind of a guiding factor. For me, when I started, I remember initially, because I had been in sales for a year and a half at that point when I started Praxis, and I was still doing a sales-ish job with a marketing firm when I started Praxis. But I wanted to learn marketing, and I was like, I think I want to learn marketing, because to me, like, I was always interested in the marketing side of the insurance business, like reaching out to my clients, constant contact type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was interested in that, but I started out in that, and then I saw something that Levi, one of the videos on operations that you might see, or I'm not sure if you'll see it or not, if it's still in the program, but it's like talking about operations, and it's Levi Morehouse. And I was like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. So I kind of like shifted my vision a little bit through it. But I mean, I ultimately ended up back in sales, and I love it, right? So um, I think that it's just important to like keep that focus. And then something I just read today, actually this morning, was Elon Musk's, one of his like productivity tips essentially is like constant feedback loop, which is, I think, you obviously understand that already, right?
Yeah.
Idea of like constantly asking yourself these questions, like, am I doing this right? Could I do this better? Like, what do I actually like? Those type of things. Because then you're just gonna slowly like sink into what you really like. Um, but yeah, I guess it's difficult because you haven't started the program yet. What are you most excited for? I guess for me, I just kind of give me an idea what I'm asking. Like, I was excited. I thought that Praxis was gonna be like this, because I came from the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, by the way. Like, where you were in Green Bay, you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know where Wausau is?
Uh,
It's like an hour and a half.
vaguely. I lived there for like 3 months in my grandparents' basement, so that's super familiar.
But well, anyways, point is, it's straight north of Madison, like 2.5 hours. Okay.
Okay.
And I grew up even further northwest of there, right in the middle of nowhere. So this idea of startups to me was like, and like these young entrepreneurial type people, like, was just shiny, and I like, ooh, that's really cool. Like, I want to be part of that. And what I realized, like, it's not that shiny and cool, right? Like, they're just regular people. But I guess, what are the things that like really seem interesting to you about this, that you're expecting and that you're hoping for?
Yeah. So to draw another comparison back to college, because that's kind of where I've been for the past few years. Um, this past semester, I was in a professional communication class. It's just like very low level presentation stuff. I had missed an entry level course, and we're preparing to go off for spring break. And I was talking to my other classmates, trying to figure out like if they had any exciting ideas or what they were doing for spring break, because I was going to use that opportunity to do everything that I couldn't fit in my free time. And they said to me, we're going to Miami for spring break. We're gonna go party. And this was in the middle of like COVID happening, and I was like, oh, we're really not here for the same reason at all, are we? So kind of finding other people that are excited about business and just creating new ideas and digging your hands into every little thing that you can. Um, Meeting more people like that, I think, is a big thing for Praxis, that is missing in schools, because everybody in Praxis, you don't really just fall into it because you don't have any better ideas or any better options. You go to Praxis because that's what you want to do. And from what I've seen in the community, everyone's excited to be here. Everyone's coming up with ideas, asking questions. Even people that have already graduated and moved on, they're still active participants. So that, to me, is the most exciting thing I've seen so far. Even after the 6-month boot camp and getting my first job, it's a cool community to be a part of.
Yeah, to me, I think that was one of the big factors was the community. I was like, getting a job is nice. I think I could do that regardless of Praxis. I was pretty sure. Like, Praxis definitely helps a lot. They taught me a lot of things I didn't realize, but I think the biggest thing there is like Praxis just shows you that you're capable of doing it. They don't actually give you anything. Like, they just point out and be like, hey, look in the mirror. Like, you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the community is like invaluable because, like, think about it. I don't know how long has Praxis been around? What, 5 years now? 4, 5
I
years?
think it started in 2013. They launched in 2014.
That's been a lot longer than I realized already. But anyways,
Yeah.
let's say 7 years, right? Been around. Like, look how big the community is already, and like, just imagine like how fast it's going to continue to grow. Like, for me, I don't know. Maybe this is selfish to some extent. I love being still engaged in the community because I get to meet new people like yourself who are like someday I might build businesses with, right? I want to build businesses ultimately. I have an idea to start a startup. I don't have the specific idea. I just want to do something. But I want to surround myself with these great people who are also like-minded because to me, like, human interaction is the best way to learn and just kind of like grow in it. To me, like, it's better than anything else, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I really value about Praxis. And again, like, I wouldn't have my job that I have now, which I'm extremely happy in, if it weren't for the community and me just being involved in it. Because I just bumped into Quinn. Quinn was like, hey, you want a job in New York? And I was like, never really thought about it, but let's have a chat. You know, we talked. He made an introduction. I got an interview, and then he made another introduction, got an interview, and started the job. Actually, he introduced me to 3 different people. So I was interviewing with like 3 companies simultaneously. And then I chose the one that he's actually working at now. So we get to work together. But no, it's so awesome. I just can't be thankful enough for Praxis. But no, you're right. Surrounding yourself with good people, like-minded people, is important.
Yeah.
What are, like, do you have any specific like business ideas for yourself that you want to start someday? Are you looking to be an entrepreneur? Are you preferring to like help grow out companies? Like, what's your thoughts there?
I'm still kind of figuring that out. I've always had like half-baked business ideas. I think a lot of people do. One time I wrote a business plan for a powered paragliding school, which I would have started if I didn't want to learn more and develop more as a professional and a person. Um, but I think for right now, my main goal is to learn as much and touch as much and experience as much of the business world as I can, um, before starting anything. And along the way, I'm sure I'm going to have business ideas. I think that's a part of who I am. And maybe eventually, I think it would be awesome to own and run a business, to come up with an idea and make it a reality. That's incredible to me. But I don't think I'm there yet. I think it's going to be a little while.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of I feel that because I did this little tiny tea business. It was something I kind of started doing because like part of the whole reason I started Praxis was I realized that making a lot of money in insurance, like it was great, but I wasn't happy, right? Like I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. I kind of fell into the job. It was offered to me, right? But I was searching for something. So I ended up starting this tiny tea business. It didn't I still they're in the red, right? Definitely didn't make any money with it. Um, but it was fun, right? And like I learned a lot, and I could revisit it someday. But the whole idea is, you know, for me with my current job in recruitment, I get to talk to really cool people and constantly hear about the issues the business, like that industry is facing, and then eventually I'll settle on an idea that's just super interesting to me, right? It's like I gotta do this, right? But I think that a lot of people, and you know maybe you have different thoughts on this, but it seems like a lot of entrepreneur types, they want to rush things, right? They're like, if I'm not doing something now, I'm not a real entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, do you get that too?
Yeah. I mean, even just having an idea, you want to dive into the end product as quickly as possible. I think sometimes it's easy to get blinded by the idea of making this really cool idea that you haven't even written about on paper yet into a real product or a real website or a real service. Um, yeah, that's definitely something I've felt before.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any book recommendations? Like, what are, I guess not book recommendations, like what are some of the books that you've read that have like kind of shaped who you've become now or changed your life in some way?
Most recently, I've been reading this book called Don't Waste Your Life, actually.
Waste your life?
Yeah, it's very fitting. It's by John Piper. And it's a lot, it's not any business focus at all. It's about Christianity and stuff like that. But
John Piper,
um,
not Joseph Piper, right?
John Piper.
Okay, because I'm reading a book by Joseph Piper, which is about it's about it's called Leisure. I think it's called Leisure: The Basis of Society or something. It's an interesting book. But
I haven't heard of that.
it sounded familiar. I was like, wait, Piper, wait, same guy maybe. I'll have to check that out. That does sound like an interesting book. One thing, uh, have you kind of come across the idea yet in Praxis of the second brain, like Tiago Forte's, you know, building a second brain type of ideology, like building out the note system?
I've seen thumbnails for articles and I think videos about that. I haven't actually looked into it at all though.
So one thing that you're probably, I don't know, I was extremely excited about it when we came and did like went through that part of the program. I don't know if that's actually part of the program still. I'm not entirely certain because they've changed it like 4 times since I left. Um, which is only like I finished the boot camp in November last year, so
Wow.
it's not been a long time. Um, but this one idea that comes to mind is we had Robbie Deeks, who works for Gary Vaynerchuk. You know Gary V?
Yeah.
So Robbie Deeks works for him in the e-commerce side of things. And he actually spoke at one of our Praxis Mondays. Super cool dude. I really enjoyed speaking to him or getting to like hear his spiel. But he talked to us about reading books that are not like related to the issues he's trying to solve. Because his big issue is like he's trying to solve the idea of subscription-based businesses primarily, or just businesses in general, that they get a lot of people on, but their attrition rate is so high that they end up like they focus on new acquisition rather than keeping people as customers. So his goal is to figure out how to keep people as customers. But he told us that even when he's reading like fiction books or history books, like he focuses on this one problem and then his brain is able to like draw out all of the lessons from those books to solve that problem. And then it kind of ties in with the building a second brain thing where you just like build out all of your notes kind of and then you can find it. It's quite interesting stuff. I think you're going to like it. Trying to think, is there any questions like you have or questions you want to
I don't have any questions, but just to go back to that last thing you said about consuming things that are different than the main idea that you're working on, I think that's really, really valuable because I think it's natural if you're trying to solve a problem, you're going to like try to figure out how other people solve that problem. Your first instinct isn't going to be to look at other ideas and other avenues of inspiration. But if you think about it, if you're trying to solve a problem in a new way and you're just regurgitating everything that everybody else has done, you're going to come up with some version of what someone else has already done. Um, and it ties back into music, actually. I watched a podcast a while ago about it. A lot of people try to copy what people up on the charts are doing. But a popular idea, something that's growing, is you listen to all the music that's outside of the genre that you're creating in, and you draw inspiration from that stuff that no one else has ever really thought to put together. So kind of like what you said, drawing connections between something unrelated and the problem that you're trying to solve. So that just kind of popped into my head, but I
Yeah,
don't have any questions.
I think that it is an interesting thing that I guess it kind of goes into the discussion with colleges, but to some extent, and I've never been like a big proponent of college. My dad always said like he wasn't a huge fan of college. Like I'm the oldest of 8 kids and we're traditional Catholics. So like you can imagine like some of the ideas that like we grew up with, right? Some people think it's crazy. I think it's overall pretty solid, but I just didn't have like anything I wanted to go to college for. I thought about maybe taking 2 years at the tech school in Wausau for like architecture because I wanted to build houses or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always like I grew up working in my dad's cabinet shop, so he built houses and then ended up selling getting buying out his partners and just doing the cabinets. And I always loved business because of that, and I liked woodworking, so I wasn't sure, but I just ultimately never went to it. But the idea that I've seen college is like the struggle that I've seen with it is it doesn't make sense to me if like you mentioned the job fair, right? If you're going to try to stand out, why are you doing what the majority of the population is doing? Unless you are like, and we're at a point, and you can obviously probably have more thoughts on this than I do because you've experienced it, but like, I feel like we're at a point where unless you have a PhD, you're probably not going to stand out to some extent. An MBA will help too. Like, obviously, I work in recruitment, so I see their educations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, to me, the education isn't what sticks out. And I don't know like what your thoughts are on sticking out and actually making an impression on somebody.
Yeah, I took a whole class as a general business class about making yourself into what a professional should be like, learning how to write resumes and stuff like that. And I remember getting so frustrated because all of the essays that I was writing on, all the hours I was spending on business analytics projects, stuff like that, an employer would never see any of that. That stuff would never see the light of day other than to my professor. And learning how to make pitches and stuff. I remember talking to Mitchell about it in one of my interviews. Learning how to make the stuff that I'm using for my education valuable to an employer, I think, is a big piece of getting a job. No one's gonna just see that you got a bachelor's degree and know all the projects that you've done, all the hours that you've put into different things. So that's a big piece, I think, in standing out because they can see the uniqueness in what you've done and how you solve different problems instead of just seeing, okay, this guy got a degree. So
I think to some extent, and like I don't obviously I don't like to offend people who, like I just don't like to offend people in general. So I'm always like cautious, but like to some extent, going to college is just simply proving you have 10 ounces of follow through.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like again, as a recruiter, like I see a lot of people's profiles, and like it really comes down to, I mean, obviously I'm not working with base level jobs. I'm working with like mid to high level jobs. but it's not about where they went to college. It's nice to see occasionally, like if you're looking for finance people and they went to, Harvard Business School, that's one thing. But if it's just some other college, like it doesn't stick out to me. Maybe it's because they don't care about college necessarily. But when we put them through to the employer, the potential employer, we don't talk necessarily about their education. We talk about what they've done in the real world that's applicable to this job. So it's like making a pitch, essentially. We don't make pitch videos, we just make summaries, but like making a pitch to the company. And it doesn't have to do anything with their education typically. Sometimes it's important to the employer, so I'll put that in there. But again, it's just like, why do 4 years of college when what really matters is what you do with your career? So why not just spend 4 years doing something in a field you love, or at least 2 years figuring it out, and then go somewhere you like, and then you can build a career.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I think Praxis is genius. Every time I think about this, like, because obviously I think Isaac Morehouse is an absolute genius. Like, I don't even know if he realized how good of an idea this was until like now. Maybe he did. Isaac, if you're watching this, I don't mean to insult you. Maybe you know this, right? But he built this community because he wanted to help kids, obviously, right? He wanted to change the status quo of this. But now he's got Crash going, right? So it's obviously working in combination. But at the same time, like, he's literally created an aggregator of really talented people and different thinking people. Like, he's just found a way to aggregate all of these good people that he can then pull from for whatever venture he wants to do someday. And he can build so many businesses off of this. It's not even funny. Like, I just think he's literally either stumbled upon this or like he realized the potential and just like, this is amazing. But anyways, so, all right. Well, anything you want to like kind of end with to close the podcast off? Anything you want to put your social plugs in? Feel free to plug yourself. No need to be ashamed. I like everybody to get follows from my like 6 viewers.
The only social media that I'm really working on right now is LinkedIn, and that's pretty empty.
It's good,
I don't really have any socials I need to plug right now, but I appreciate the opportunity.
If you do build your website or whatever with Praxis, just feel free to like message it to me. I can add it to the description later on.
Sure.
And get it all.
Do that.
But no, man, it was really great talking to you. I'm excited to see how Praxis goes for you. I would probably, it'd be nice to connect after you're done with the boot camp, or maybe along the way, or maybe once you've gotten to your apprenticeship, because what I've found is that every Praxian has had something change along the way. Like something, even though like no matter how focused they were going into it, something has clicked and changed a little bit. And it's just always interesting to see that transition at the end. But yeah, man, appreciate you taking the time, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no worries. And go Wisconsin, I guess, right?
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, man. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, share with someone who might enjoy it as well. Subscribe for more content, and as always, live deliberately.